543. Hello and welcome to the Thursday process. Thank you for joining us here today. There's three of us on here now, so you'll notice an extra host for today's session. We're gonna get started. We're gonna get started just in a couple of minutes. So if you need to grab a glass of water, shut your office door, whatever, get some popcorn, something like that. Now's the time to do that. We will get started right at 11:32.
I think I'll take you up on that.
I want some popcorn. I don't have popcorn. That's not fair.
Oh, Steve with the water pour right there. Nicely done.
You gotta, I found that I'm a big guy, so you're supposed to drink an ounce for every 2 pounds you are, and I don't know how many gallons that adds up for me, but
that is one of those
gallons
things
of water
I know I should do, and I'm very bad at it.
See, if you take nothing else away from the Thursday process today, remember to hydrate, everyone. Yes. That's your daily reminder. We're going to get started in just under a minute. We'll get started. So again, if you have anything that crisis critical to do, now's the time to do it. We'll get started right at 11:32. Oh. Okay, here we go. It's 11:32. Hello, happy Thursday. Happy Thursday before Thanksgiving for those of you in the States. Happy Thursday after IT Nation for those of you everywhere. Welcome to the Thursday process. Couple of housekeeping tasks right off the top. I've noticed that there are some folks chatting. It sounds like people are getting audio now. So if we are getting audio, just throw out a message in there and let me know that, hey, like audio's fine, audio quality's fine. There is a little bit of a delay. So even if you send a message, we're on about a 10-second delay. So don't expect an immediate response to things popped into the chat or the Q&A. Perfect. Thank you, guys. Appreciate you doing that. A quick disclaimer here. Presentations on the Thursday process are intended for educational purposes only. They should not replace independent professional advice or your own personal judgment. Statements of facts and opinions expressed are those of the participants individually. They don't represent opinion or position of employers, certifying bodies, etc. Nothing on these webinars should ever be considered legal or financial advice. You may be watching this on demand. If so, today's date is the 17th of November, 2022. Please note that the content has not been updated, modified, revised, etc. from that time. So a little bit of housekeeping. Everybody can see that there's the chat on there. As a full disclosure, I'm usually watching the questions and answers section instead of the audience chat. So if you have questions, use the Q&A section. That kind of pops up on my screen in a different way. You don't have to hold your questions to the end. Throw them out. Steve and I will grab them, and we'll stitch them into the conversation as appropriate. Anything that doesn't get answered, if you make sure you throw it in that Q&A thing, that actually gets preserved with the webinar, so we can follow up with you after the fact in case we don't get to them due to the course of conversation. So please do use the Q&A section for any and all questions. There are polls. You'll start seeing those polls pop up on your screen probably in about 6 minutes. Please do answer those polls. They're super helpful for us because they help us steer the content for this webinar series. And that's the point of the webinar series, is to deliver the content that everybody's looking for. Last but not least, there's a handout section. You'll see the process that we're talking about there. Please go ahead and download that process right now. That's yours to keep. That's yours to take away. So you can download it now. You can download it any time. I'll prompt you again near the end of the webinar to grab it in case you case you didn't get to it beforehand. And so without further ado, there's a few people on this call, and I would like everyone to know who they are. I'm Ian Richardson. I ran a managed service company for about 16 years before selling at the end of last year, and I'm one half of the Richardsons of Richardson and Richardson, along with my wife, Carrie, who is not on this webinar. And I'm joined by Steve Taylor. Steve, how's it going today?
Oh, I'm doing awesome.
Thanks for joining us. Steve is the founder and up until this Monday, previous owner of Rocket MSP, and he's folded his organization into Richardson and Richardson, and he's joined our team as our project manager. So you'll start seeing him on these webinars too. Steve will be helping us out by managing those polls so they pop up at the appropriate time. Appreciate you being here, Steve. And the person who we're speaking with today is my good friend Jennifer Bleam. Jennifer, how are you?
I am doing so well. I'm excited that Steve's on because he's a process junkie. So this is going to be fun for him and for all of us. I'm excited. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's my privilege and my pleasure. Jennifer is the founder and the head Sherpa over at MSP Sales Revolution. Pretty much, if you're thinking about legends in the IT channel, Jennifer belongs right up there. Her credentials include building numerous multi-million-dollar internal divisions for robust and profitable companies. She's an award-winning speaker, an author with a best-selling book, which you should absolutely be hammering and getting today, and a member of the CompTIA Emerging Tech Council. When she's not keeping busy helping people rise the tide on cyber, she spends time with her husband and 3 boys, enjoys travel, Marvel, and is a serious board game competitor. And so, most important question of the webinar, Jennifer, favorite board game?
It's a game called Acquire. So picture like a stock market game where you want to be the majority shareholder in the small company that's about to get gobbled up by a big company. So you get all kinds of money to go buy more stuff so you can rinse and repeat that as many times as possible. My family won't play with me because I always win. And that is always on my birthday wish list is what do I want for my birthday? I want to play Acquire just once and I'll be happy.
Nice. Bring it to the next show that we're both going to be at. I'm down.
Sounds like a plan. Good. I will.
I'm down. So diving into the process we're talking about today, everyone, is about content creation. So, and I realized that my process says culture creation, which is an incorrect misspelling. So I will go ahead and get that updated at some point. But it's content creation. So this process is around creation using long form content to create additional content that's more digestible or more usable, more friendly, so to speak, for an audience at large. And so first things first, Jennifer, why don't you give us a little bit of background as to what was going on at MSP Sales Revolution that made you say, you know what, we really probably need to focus and redo the way that we're creating content.
So as with many things, there's a lot of kind of converging forces that were happening all at the same time. So the first thing is that video right now, and video when we started this concept, was hot. Like video right now is hot. The search engines prioritize it. So that is kind of data point number one. Data point number two is that there's a fair amount of bad information out there when it comes to marketing and sales for MSPs. Carrie and I were just chatting about that this morning. So we've got video is hot. We've got bad information about marketing and sales. We've got MSPs and technology service providers that are hungry for the good information. And I got to the point where, as many times as I said to my MSP clients, you have a duty and an obligation to support your community and to protect your community with valid cybersecurity offers. My words started to haunt me where I know what to do from a marketing and sales standpoint. So I felt like I had a duty and an obligation to share that information with my community. And so those were kind of the data points that converged to say, okay, how do we create video content that will deliver the right message to help people move the needle on their revenue goals.
Perfect. That's like, it's interesting that you're talking about video. It's such a weird thing there. But one of the things that I always forget, and Steve had reminded me of this, is that you have to think about who owns what product in the space. Like, one of the biggest search engine platforms ever is Google, and Google owns a little itty bitty product that nobody's heard of called YouTube.
Yes, I've
And
heard
they
of it.
want,
Never use it.
I know, right? And they want people utilizing YouTube. They want video, they want visual content, they want other types of medium. So utilizing effective video as part of your key content strategy helps out, not only to give a different method to consume, right? Some people are more audio visual learners versus written word learners versus, hey, I just got to go out and play with it learners. But it also rewards you on that SEO, or how do you keep relevant? How do you pop up in search engines?
Well, and then you can really get ninja and embed your videos on your website, which means that YouTube is really pointing to your website when you embed it correctly. And YouTube is a very high quality SEO thing. Like, I don't know SEO, but I know enough to say, hey, if YouTube is pointing to my website, that's a good thing. And so there's a lot of strategy behind the strategy, which of course provides additional opportunities for optimization, and that'll be next year.
And so when you were saying, okay, we've got this long form content, we wanna use it in a way. We need to do something. You guys, when we had talked on our prep call, you had mentioned, like, hey, we started doing it, and then we had a significant problem where we started bumping into some barriers and some roadblocks and things like that, and that caused the genesis of this process. So what was going on in your world specifically as the entrepreneur, as that sales leader and visionary leader, that was causing some stress?
So I was the one creating all of the content, and I didn't want to change that. But what I realized is that almost every step of the process had to be touched by yours truly. And yours truly has a million other things going on, and I'm very busy. That's the way I'm wired. It's okay. And I'm typically very busy doing the right things, but I was being pulled out of that constantly. Our goal was to say new piece of long form content approximately every week. And so as we looked at all of the steps post recording, like, of course, I'm going to have to hit record. And of course, before I hit record, I need the outline. After that, I really wanted to be hands off, and I was anything but hands off. It was extremely time consuming. It wasn't documented at the time, right? Like anything, when you first start, it's not documented. So it was just taking me a tremendous amount of time, which then meant that I was the bottleneck, which is always the sign that you need some improvements and optimizations to your process.
100%. And if you're doing one of the it's an interesting balance, because what's the most valuable thing for a business leader, a business owner, an entrepreneur to be doing? Hey, the promotion and growth of the business is right up there near the top. But if trying to do the promotion of the business is getting in the way of running and generating revenue for the business, then suddenly you've got that, instead of marketing and sales going parallel, you have marketing and sales butting head and going, hey, which one's more important? And that's not a place that anyone wants to be in.
No, agreed.
And so looking at the process, this is a multi-step process. So if you're following along in the document, it's in the process section, which, by the way, I just updated that document. So if you guys want to re-download it and have the right title on it, you can. But looking at step 2, one of the interesting parts was, hey, we've got our video, we've got our hour webinar, our hour podcast, our hour webcast. Then you're choosing the edits. And this is a really interesting point. How do you pick out which edits you want to make? You've got the video, you might have a transcription or some chapter markers, but how are you choosing, like, hey, these are the things that we're going to pull out and focus on?
Yeah, so I want to back up to what you said at the beginning because you mentioned long form content. And so, right now, all of the content that we are doing this with is about 10 minutes. So, we are not doing this yet with 1 hour training sessions or 1 hour webinars or a 30-minute podcast. We are doing this with about 7 to 10 minutes of when it's edited, it becomes 7 to 10 minutes of long form content. So I think
Mhm.
the principles will still apply with a 1 hour video. But the first thing we do is clean up the ugly, like the beginning part where you're clearing your throat and you're getting centered on camera and you're like, oh, my desk is ugly behind me, like let me clean that up. So just doing the basic, that is pretty straightforward at this point. Like, hey, if I cough or sneeze, or I'm like, oh, that's not what I meant to say, let me back up a paragraph and start over. So that kind of those edits are relatively easy. The more because they're systemizable, you can tell your editor, hey, if I cough or sneeze, or if I say, oh, I wasn't supposed to say that, let me try again, or oh, that's really bad. Those
You
are
see me
obvious.
go like this?
My favorite outtake is when I was busy creating a birthday bundle this past March, and I wanted to do it in one take, which I don't think this is necessarily on the talking points, but perfectionism can be your worst enemy. Like nobody's going to go, oh look, there was a cut there. I bet they messed up and didn't say the right thing. Like I am always my own worst critic. But for my birthday bundle, I wanted it to be in one take because I did, like, whatever.
Mhm.
And it was a great take, and I got to the end and I flubbed my own name. And I'm like, and I'm Jennifer, and it just wouldn't come out. The words just got stuck. And so I'm like, well, shoot, I'm gonna have to do an edit. So it took me 10 takes to get my own name and my company name out. And I do have that video. At some point, I will share it with the public because
The outtakes video? Oh
outtakes,
yeah.
I have the outtakes video. And it's important to be able to laugh at yourself, but it's important to understand you're really not going for perfection. I do recommend that you pronounce your name correctly. But beyond that, it's okay to clear your throat, and it's okay to, one of my clients just said, happy Thanksgiving, but he serves a global audience, and he's like, for those of you in the States, and
Mhm.
he just corrected it. Like, it's okay, you can be human. So those are easy. And then beyond that, what we try to do is have three very clear main points. And so I've gotten better as anything, the more you do it, the more you get better at it. I will say point number one that goes with the main point, and point number two, point number three. Sometimes there's four main points, and that I want that to be very clear. And so we tell the editor to leave a little bit of space on either end, just to let it breathe for a second. I then have to remember when I'm recording it at the beginning to not blaze through my talking points. And so, because we have systemized it, all of my videos tend to have 3 or 4. I think I have one that has 5 main points, but that allows us to systemize the editing piece.
So that's by creating almost a structured approach to how you're doing the base piece of content. Editing becomes easier and the short form becomes easier because it's always the same way.
Yes. And then when we go to the point where we're wanting to create, let's say, a quote card or something like that,
Mhm.
we actually do get it. We get it transcribed. Lots of different tools you can use for that. I use rev.com. We're going to be trialing Descript. I think it's descript.io.
Yep.
That allows you to remove your ums and ahs, and you're literally editing text, and it's smart enough to edit that text in the video. So there's an that we could then edit out if we were using Descript, but we're then able to take that the transcript that's on a screen, and I've got a team that highlights what they believe to be key points that can potentially someday become audio only, like audiograms. Right now we turn them
Mhm.
into quote cards, and then those today they do come back to me because I don't have a copywriter on the team. So
So as an aside, when Steve merged in with us, Steve uses Descript, and we're adopting it as well. And we just finished up our procedure documentation, so shoot that as an aside. Anyone on the call, if you're interested in seeing that stuff, happy to share some of that documentation with you. You'll see value. Just ping me. Happy to always share that sort of build out. And so one of the things that really resonated with me about what we just talked about is that systemization. That's for those of you who've watched these series before, you all recognize this slide deck. It's the same one every time. I'm a big systems and process guy, hence the reason why I do a weekly webinar about process, because this is kind of one of my happy spaces to land. But every piece of content we've been doing has followed that same sort of thing. My podcasts always have 3 segments. The Thursday process webinar always follows a set timeline and really down to the minutes where it's planned out. And that, as someone who's just starting to do the process that Jennifer and her team are doing, we're starting to take all of our long form content, and over December, we're building our backlog library of, hey, here's our quick hit videos. Here's the transcribed portion for those video clips, and the converting those transcriptions into blog articles, exactly as Jennifer's advocating for in this process, and unintentionally by systemizing things, mainly so that yours truly right here doesn't screw it up. Because if I do the same exact thing every time, it's easy for me to succeed.
Well, it's also easy for you to go back and say, okay, that thing that happened in October, like, whatever it was, why did it happen? Did I, Jennifer, fail to follow the process? Like, okay, Jennifer needs retraining. That happens, right? Humans are humans. Or do we need to optimize that process? Do we need to add a step that dummy proofs it? And in my company's case, it's often me that is the dummy. And so it's taking that time to say, why did that not feel so smooth? Or where can we automate, which we'll probably talk about. But why does it not feel smooth? Why are we missing deadlines? Like, sometimes we're going so quickly that we don't take the time to analyze our existing process. And we try to have at least a skeleton process, because it's easier to build from there and to improve. I've been amazed by some of the bigger name people that those listening would probably recognize, that have great content strategies. It appears that they're doing a great job repurposing content. And I've actually approached them and asked if I could purchase their documentation, their process documentation. And it doesn't usually exist. And I'm like, how in the world? Like, okay, someone is holding it together with duct tape and bubble gum, which is not scalable. It's extremely dangerous. And so, Ian, I love this webinar series. I love that you're building that process internally, because many companies don't have it. And I don't understand how they can, it's not sustainable.
It isn't. And there was an interesting line. And I think this is an Israel Langism. For those of you who don't know Israel, he's been a guy in the channel for a long time, both on the MSP side and on the vendor side. He worked with HTG and then ConnectWise for a long time as a strategic planner and a coach, and was an early mentor in my MSP days. And Israel was always a fan of saying, that there's a couple of things, and one of them got around ConnectWise quite a bit, right? Like, if it wasn't in ConnectWise, it didn't happen. But if you didn't document, you didn't do it. But the other piece was that if you don't replace yourself in the business, you'll be why the business fails. So making it so that every task, every key system, business process, etc., especially at the entrepreneurial desk, can be moved to anyone else. That's what allows your company to not only scale, but that allows you to exit your company. So if you're holding like a key bag, or even if it's not you, if it's your admin assistant, if it's someone else on your team, if that person is holding that single source of truth and knowledge, your company cannot transact because of that risk. If you've got one dude who knows how to drop a phone system, or one guy who knows how to configure your security products, or one person who knows how to sell, or one person who knows how to bill, that key system business process is not a business process that is institutional knowledge that lives with a person. And until you get that out and on paper, and it doesn't have to be pretty, most of our procedure documents at R&R are like Times New Roman left justified, like no formatting. They're not even on letterhead. Like it just exists, and it's screenshots and quick little bullet points. But if you don't have that stuff built, those procedures built, and then overarching process documentation built, it's not a problem for today. And the other piece of the of the puzzle there is don't plan for your business today, plan for your business tomorrow.
Yes.
Like, it's not a problem when you're 5 people or 10 people and $1 or $2 or $3 million. But once you're $6 million and you have a couple of different geos, suddenly that little thing that was kind of annoyingly cute every once in a while when it bottlenecked up is suddenly a major business crisis. And that fire has had gasoline poured on it by your sales team, which just did their job and grew you. So looking keeping on with our process, another big piece is that you've got a couple of review cycles in your process, right? You have edits that come back from a video editor, moving down the process. It then goes to copy, so that the copy can kind of take that video, take that transcription, and say, all right, here's a blog, here's a whatever, here's a supporting bit of content off of this video that ties into it. And then you're doing a review cycle back to there. So you've built review refreshes into your process, like ground up. You're not waiting till all the end. You're like, okay, here's a place where we need to do a QA. Here's a place where we need to do a QA. What is that focus on building quality assurance into the process from ground up done for you and your team?
So the reason for that is my very driven personality. Like, if something is going to be at the end of a process and it's coming to me just for the final stamp of approval, there are some bare minimum things that better be in place. And so this process evolved after Jennifer was frustrated, and I'm pretty good at not taking it out on my team, because if I haven't ever told them what to do, then my team can't deliver it to me. And so there's a lot of leadership that has to happen, and a lot of honest looking in the mirror. But because I've now built that into the process, most of the content comes to me and it is ready to go. And so it is literally a rubber stamp. And now that we've built this process out, if I get something that I can't rubber stamp, I'll give you for example in a minute. But I had a piece of content cross my desk last week that I couldn't rubber stamp. It just wasn't right. And I'm like, why is this piece of content not right? Because it's not enough for me just to say, oh, this isn't right, it should say this, go edit it and bring it back to me. And that's functional, but that doesn't help the process get any better. And so we've actually created in the last couple of weeks some all pieces of content must. And in the case that I wasn't able to approve it, it was solid content, but it didn't stand alone. Like, without a little bit of a bookend of the content that came before and the content that came after, that sentence or two didn't make any sense. It was just this abstract, like, couple of sentences, like, I don't know why you're telling me this. It has no context. And so that is now a part of, like, before you give this to me, make sure it creates emotion, make sure that it can stand alone, that it makes sense to someone if they didn't see the greater 10-minute video. Because if someone's just reading 2 sentences on a quote card, it doesn't necessarily make sense. And so that is now part of it. So creating all of those intermediate steps has allowed me to remove myself as the bottleneck, and it's actually sped up our content creation process, because now we are awfully close to, I'm selecting the topic, I'm creating the outline, I get on video, hit record, and I'm hands off until the very end when it comes to me and it's ready for me to approve.
I love that every content, every piece, every time guidance. We had a lot of folks joining us today are going to be in the IT channel space. And back at my old MSP, we had every ticket, every time guidance. No matter if this was a password reset that you took care of in 30 seconds on the phone, all the way to some sort of complex incident response scenario, every ticket got a certain set of actions every single time. which created a uniform service desk experience.
Yes.
How a lot of you on the call probably are doing the same thing. Like, hey, you have this in your service delivery. Think about content. One of the things that's been helpful for me is just think about content as part of your service delivery. It's your sales team's lead generation service delivery, right? Like, you are delivering this content as part of a service to your sales team to funnel leads into them. That's marketing's job, is to open up opportunities. But focus and run it just like you do HR or finance or service delivery or security or whatever. It's just build some processes and create those guidelines and barricades, those road barricades to keep your team on target, right? Because if you've got an acceptable window of here, and as long as they're bumping back and forth, it's okay if one's a little bit better than another, as long as they're both following guidelines. Hey, that was just a great piece of content. Good job. So, and then keeping going down, one of the other big pieces that I thought was really, really, really powerful was kind of creation of a calendar. And you mentioned that you kind of have a weekly, monthly breakdown of guide of actions of, hey, this is, we're starting off with this big piece of content, and here's the other things that every big piece of content, that long form, should generate, and here's our cadence. Is the creation, being a goal person, I recognize SMART goals when I see them.
Yes.
Is that the impetus of this, and how is creating that cadence useful for keeping on track with your overarching goal? Which I do want you to also kind of share that overarching goal that you had shared with me. Like, hey, we've got this crazy big thing about having the repository. So
yes. Well, and that's actually the answer to your first question. And so this is almost a trite business saying, but that's because there's wisdom in it, which is like, begin with the end in mind. And so my goal was to create one piece of content per week, one piece of long form content that's original per week, so that we could have a big, long library ready to post to social media, ready to post to the website in case I wanted to go on vacation for a week or two or three. Shocking. Like, what? You don't want to work 40, 50, 60 hours a week every single week? And so that was my vision, is I want to be able to share great content, but I want the freedom to not to have to share great content this week, because we have a solid library. And so that was the vision that we set out to achieve, was, okay, once we have 12 long, let's say 10, that's easier math, like 10 long form videos, that means we have 30 short form videos, which means we probably have 50 quote cards, and so it's almost a marketing funnel, upside down marketing funnel. Like, we started with one piece of content, and it creates a life of its own, which is fantastic. So that's what we set out to achieve, was it's almost like, how did we clone Jennifer and have Jennifer showing up on almost any social media channel except TikTok? I've got like some philosophical issues about posting security content on TikTok, although I have people telling me I'm wrong. You guys can argue with me later, buy me coffee and prove me wrong. I'm open to learning. We're also not on Instagram yet. That may be changing in 2023, but we are on Facebook. I've got a Facebook group. I've got my own Facebook brand page. I have my personal Facebook page. We are on LinkedIn, my page, company page, and we're on those platforms almost every day. And there is a piece of me that feels a little bit guilty when people are like, I see you all the time. And I'm like, yeah, but that was a piece of content I recorded 4 months ago. And they're like, that hit me exactly when I needed it. And I'm like, but I recorded it in the summer. And so I've kind of gotten over that guilt, because that was the reason I created this strategy in the first place, was so that I could show up at the right time for my clients, my prospects, an MSP that may never hire me, but it hits them where they are when they're ready. And so I've mostly gotten over that guilt. It's really fun that I walk into, IT Nation, and someone called me a luminary. Like, oh, you're a luminary in the channel, because I'm not afraid to get on video and publish things that aren't perfect and then repurpose them, a single piece of content down into 20 or 30 micro pieces of content, or snackable content is what some people call it. And it has just been really fun to watch that evolve over time.
Well, and that one of the things you really hit on there is that folks on these webinar series are generally in senior leadership or in an ownership role, and we all have to be. I had a peer from my old peer group, a guy named Nick Gant. Nick, hopefully you watch this. But one of the things that Nick always said to me, and a little tongue in cheeky, was, "I'm greedy with my time." And Nick's a very charitable man. He does a lot of charitable initiatives, etc. But he's by greedy, and he uses that term intentionally, making sure that you do create barriers around your time and roadblocks to getting on your time, makes it so that your time is spent in that highest and best use. And so by creating those wells of content, if you've got one of the highest and best uses, at least in my world, is, hey, we've got a well qualified sales opportunity. That's a pretty highest and best use. Like, that's driving revenue, that's driving opportunity, that drives potential to referrals. Any number of things can drop out of going and spending some time with someone in that qualified discovery conversation. So we always that's right at the top. That is a number one priority. Like, keep it at the top, make sure we do it well. And some weeks you might go through that week and like, hey, we had 1 or 2 conversations. Cool. And then other weeks it's like, oh my God, there are 30 of them on the calendar. I can do nothing else. And if you don't have those wells, if you haven't taken some time and said, all right, I'm going to carve 2 days here and do a bunch of content, and I'm going to carve 2 days here, 3 days here, and do a bunch of content. If you don't have that backlog so that, hey, the machine keeps going, you bubble up and you bump your consistency. And speaking as someone who, not to throw the confetti for our own parade, but Carrie's probably one of the most strategic marketing minds I've ever met. From all of those conversations throughout the time that I've known her, marketing is just consistency and luck. Yes. And you luck into that person hearing you and saying, ooh, that resonates with me today, much like your experience with the person that you just met at show. That really hit me today. But by consistently presenting it through this type of a process, you really create your own luck by saying, like, here's the message, here's the message, here's the message. Oh, well, I'm ready to hear it now. Great. Welcome into the fold.
Yes. When the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And so my goal is to be that teacher as often as I possibly can. And you're right. If I'm doing one-on-one coaching, well, that benefits that one person. If I can kind of coach the whole channel, that's fantastic. And so that's really what we're trying to do. And for the MSPs that are listening, of course, you're not coaching, you're reaching your community. And we, depending on time, we may get into like, what would MSPs talk about? But my clients are simply talking about security issues, or talking about like, why is security a thing? Or how do I pick a service provider? All of those things that you wish your clients would ask you and prospects would ask you.
100%. A couple of key pieces. The infrastructure section has some of the tools and technologies that Jennifer and her team use, but big pieces of project management and a visualization of project management system. You don't have to build out a huge Excel spreadsheet with dates and times anymore for project management. You can build graphic timelines. Those are big ones. Automation and integration systems, somewhere to host content on, video, audio, etc. Transcription software, recording software. You'd already mentioned Descript. That's a really powerful one out there. But figuring out what those software platforms are, and then as we alluded to at the start, building the documentation so that it doesn't have to be the Jennifer or the Ian or the Steve or the whoever running every single part of it. You can divide and conquer. So on the process, every process needs to have management. We got to have a way to say like, hey, we're doing this thing. How are we doing? Right? What gets measured gets managed. And so there's some key things. There were some key questions, and this really resonated with me, that the management technique you use for this process is based in curiosity. It's based through like, hey, I'm just answering these questions. They're yes nos. I love yes no binary management. Like, did
Yes.
we do it or did we not? And if we didn't, okay, well then, like, a no is bad and a yes is good. So walk us through walk us through that management technique and how you came up with those questions to figure out how to manage something like this, because content and marketing's tough. It's
Yeah.
much more amorphous versus like, hey, the ticket got responded to within 95 seconds.
Yes, 100% true. But it's still that same part of the brain, right? So the first question, like, did the content get created, edited, and posted on time? That question used to be, did the content get posted on time? But then if the content was garbage, the answer was yes, it got posted on time. But it was like, okay, but that's not the way we want our brand to show up to the world. So we had to tweak that question a little bit, and that question came from a time that our content did not get posted on time. And so one of the things that we do is we take a video from 3 or 4 months ago and we repurpose that into a blog. And so we take that transcription that we get from Rev, we give it to our content writer, and we're like, hey, here's a short little video that became a transcription. Could you create it into a blog? Like, add some additional stuff. Here's some research, or you go do the research, and we need 1,000-word blog. Well, our goal is to post that blog by the first of the month. It didn't happen. And so I just asked the question, okay, we have a blog. It's supposed to be posted by the first of the month. Was it posted? I already knew it wasn't posted. And the answer was no. And then we said, okay, why not? Because that's an opportunity for process improvement. And so that's why that first question is now part of our process, because we missed a deadline. And so we needed to add a deadline related question to our process. So did it get posted on time and in alignment with our brand guidelines and how we want our brand to show up? And then the second thing, this is because we began with the end in mind. Do we have a library of content? Is that library growing? How many weeks could Jennifer check out, flake out, get COVID, need to go take care of an aging family member, have a sister that had a car accident, she needs me to come take care of her for months? Like, I need that. Number one, it was the goal of the strategy, but I need that because accidents happen, unexpected things happen. I had a team member that I had to fire a couple of days ago. I didn't exactly have extra time in my calendar to go post the job, and so I needed to know, okay, if this is a day where I was planning to create more content and I genuinely cannot do it, not because I don't feel like it or because I'm lazy or I didn't want to do my hair and makeup that day, but legitimately something had to bleed into that time block. I needed to know, but it's okay because our ongoing strategy will continue to execute. So do we have a library of ready to go content? How many weeks? And ideally, is that number of weeks growing, so that we're planning for the unplannable, if you will. And then the last one is more of a gut feel. Are we experiencing any kind of scope creep or calendar creep, which is generally because Jennifer's taking things off of people's plate, either because they're not getting done right, so now we can go back and retrain, or the documentation wasn't great, or Jennifer's having control issues, which it's not usually the last one, but at times it might be. And so that is just a gut check for, are we continuing to drive this ship forward without Jennifer getting back to where she has to be in the driver's seat for all of these steps? So it's a pretty simple management process.
I love the simplicity, right? Like the simplest solution is often the best one, in lack of an out. Unless you have a outside influence, Occam's razor holds true for management 100% of the time.
Yes.
But I also like that even with a more, say, amorphous, fluid thing like content creation, there still is some objective measurements. Like, hey, this is a numerical measure. How many weeks of content do we have, or months, or whatever your cadence is? How many periods of time do we have of fully ready to bake content in our bank? Like, that's a number. What was,
Yes.
and then if you just track that number per management cycle, so if you're doing a review once a month, hey, like it's November, we're reviewing, we have 10 weeks. In October, we had 8. That means we're going up in terms of our bank. So that's a positive trend
Always
versus a
good.
decreasing trend.
Yes.
So you've got some some subjective things with the gut checks and all of that, but there are metrics that you can extrapolate in almost any situation. They're not hard metrics. This is, hey, how many pieces of content we got? Oh, we got 25. Well, we need 5 per week. That's 5 weeks. What did we have last week? We had 20. Great. We're going up.
Yes.
Perfect. We just had some number measurement and all of that. So thinking about those metrics and considering the key metrics are cool, are such a good, great, freeing business idea. But then I also like that with each one of those questions, it's, hey, how does this relate to goal? Like, what was the goal of this strategy, and keep the why in mind.
Yeah,
So,
totally agree.
100%. And you had already kind of talked through some of the missteps, but one of the things about this too is that feedback is always important. And sometimes with feedback, it can be internal feedback. So we got to kind of reflect and ask ourselves. I am 100% guilty of standing in front of the mirror and saying, okay, Ian, what did you do? Well, this is what I did, self. All right. What did you learn? Nothing.
Okay, wait, add a third question. If you were coaching someone else, what advice would you give them?
Exactly.
Man, I have found I have really good advice if I simply ask myself that question. I didn't used to ask myself that question.
Oh yeah, it's like, okay, if this was someone else on your team, what would you say? And it's like, right, I better get back to work and write down. And then, so one of the tools that I used to use, and I just need to go buy more sticky notes. I have no idea where they all went, but I used to have little sticky notes, and I'd throw the thing on there when it's like, okay, you messed this up. Like, here's the reminder, and it lives there for a week.
Yes.
So every day for the next 7 days, like, just what's the date? What was it? It's like, all right, every day you see that when you're brushing your teeth. So then at the end of the 7 days, you crumple up, you throw it away. You're like, okay, I got it, self.
Yes.
Thanks. But you have a couple of feedback mechanisms, which one of them ties into the management period. Hey, am I experiencing scope creep? But really, it's hey, has scope creep been removed? And was that through, like, I'm on task, I'm getting through, like, I've got 10 things on my calendar, I'm getting through them. Like, what was kind of the way that you were able to see that, hey, my world's getting better?
So it was because at one point my world was not so good with regard to this particular process. And so I tend to be a very introspective type of person, which carries with it good things and bad. But as I was looking at this process and thinking it through, we talked about this earlier, that so many of the pieces of the puzzle were on my plate, but I didn't realize it. Like, I just knew that it felt heavy. It felt like a burden. It felt clunky. It felt like I was pulling this whole process uphill, even though I have team members that were willing, that they knew what their roles were. And it just felt too hard. And I'm like, this is not sustainable. If I want to continue to do this every single week and repurpose this and get my message out to the world, it cannot be this heavy. I cannot pull everything uphill. And so I blocked off some time on my calendar and I said, okay, what are the steps? And so I looked at the process and I went, okay, this step is assigned to Jennifer. This step is assigned to Jennifer. This step is assigned to Jennifer. And so that's a little eye-opening. It's almost like when you do an accountability chart inside of Traction and you see your name in way too many boxes. That is very similar to what this was. And then I knew all of the steps were mandatory. I never want to automate or offload pieces of the puzzle that don't need to happen. But the first thing I said is, can I automate any of this? And this is like, looking back, it's ridiculous and silly, but I took a 15-step manual process, with Jennifer doing almost all the manual, and simply used Zapier, and I think Zapier and some automations inside of Trello to take it from manual 15 steps, 14 of which were Jennifer's job, to a lot of automation. I think we went down to 6 or 7 steps that then needed to be manual. And then I farmed as many of those manual steps out as possible. So we really took our clunky 15 steps down to 7 steps just by looking at automation tools. And it's Zapier. It's not like a fancy, it's just a basic tool that probably everyone listening has. And so, but taking that time for introspection and saying, okay, why does this feel heavy? Or why is this not going to fuel my end desire? And how can we fix that? Because just about every problem is fixable.
Well, I love that. One of the big highlights there, which it's funny, I am incapable, and I'm certain many people on this call too, I'm incapable of talking with another entrepreneur, another CEO, and not going light bulb. And I just got one live on air here, so I appreciate you, Jennifer. And I'm going to say it so that it's recorded so I can come back here and steal it and use it. But that accountability chart ping, I don't know how many folks here are a fan of pictures in process. I usually do flowcharts and all of that, but just throwing in the name of the job role or the person responsible for each step in that graphical representation, as well as a, mandatory or optional designation. Do we have to do this for the process to succeed, or is this a would-be nice step? That's a pretty cool update to process documentation. So
yes,
consider that swiped.
I love it. Swipe and deploy, and you get to swipe and deploy and make it even better. That's the brilliance of swiping and deploying.
That's right. And so for those of you who aren't familiar with that acronym, steal with intentionality and pride every day. I should have it tattooed on my arm. So Jennifer, one of the things that we always like to do here is to take a couple of minutes and kind of talk about, well, hey, like, you've got this content creation strategy, you've got this process that you've been doing. What's the business that this process is supporting? So tell us a little bit about MSP Sales Revolution and what you guys do in the IT channel for MSPs.
Yeah, I love it. So I support MSPs that are flirting with $1 million in revenue up to about 7 million in revenue. And we do what we need to do to get them to grow. We put a heavy focus on cybersecurity, making sure that they know how to message cybersecurity and sell it highly profitably. And what we're realizing is that every MSP goes through a 9-step a roadmap. So I call myself the cybersecurity Sherpa. So I take people through those 9 steps to make sure that they are able to scale the mountain and reach whatever their goal is. And that sounds a little bit nebulous, but it's because every business owner has a different goal. Some people want to get to $5 million and sell. Other people want to become a multi-state conglomerate. Other people want a lifestyle business that allows them to pursue passion projects and spend time with their grandkids. And so I don't take a specific goal and say, this is what all of my clients have, because that's not my job. My job is to give them sales tools, marketing advice to help them get to wherever they want to go, whatever their end goal and end desire is.
Yeah, are they a value builder? Are they an empire builder? Are they or are they lifestyling and just raking and pursuing other things? I love that alignment with goals. So if I was an MSP and say I've got some stuff, right? Like I would hope that there's no MSPs still in 2022 who don't at least have some parts of the puzzle put in. But I'm coming into you and I'm saying, hey, Jennifer, I'm a couple $1 million MSP, and I really want to figure, like, I'm nervous about security. I want to be able to monetize this, but I want to be able to sleep better at night. You can kind of help them get that to there, no matter if they're looking to be acquired or just raking capital and funding their life. You can still help them
yes,
with their own direction.
100% true. Yeah, I mean, like we were saying earlier, asking really good questions is critical to a coach or a consultant that's working with your company. So sometimes I go into companies and they don't have that vision anymore, or their vision has shifted and no one asked those questions and gave them a safe space to answer those questions. Like, what is it that you're really wanting? And I think too often people feel like there's a right answer, and so they parrot that right answer, but that right answer isn't really what they want in their heart and soul, and so it doesn't resonate with them, and therefore they don't chase after that dream because it isn't their dream. It's a dream that somebody else gave them. And so I provide a safe space to say, just like, what is your dream? Let's find out what that is. Let's reconnect with it, and let's make sure we're getting a little bit closer every single day, every single year.
I love that. I love that. So there's been some questions kind of popping in from the audience. Just a quick reminder, everyone, if you're curious about this process, if you want that process, it's under the handouts tab in the upper right-hand corner. Download it now. If you don't have a chance, if it gives you any issues, just ping me after the webinar and I'm happy to get it over to you. Michael from the audience had asked, one problem we continue to have is we're posting quality content. It's 5 days per week. Lots of people are seeing it. We're not getting comments, reshares, or other engagement. What could be done to improve engagement? And so he mentioned a little bit of supplemental. They're doing infographics, checklists, ebooks, video, no gated content. So that just means the content's freely available. So what can be done to improve engagement? And so I'll throw in a couple of things here. And Jennifer, I'd love to have your take on this. Michael, some of the things, there's been some other series on here about thought leadership marketing. So really, it's all around number and network and how much you've done for them. So there are certain techniques where you can tag certain people in your posts, etc., to try to encourage engagement from those people and then from their audiences. But it sounds like that preliminarily, without any other information, that sounds like a network problem. It sounds like the network has limited reach and the network hasn't done enough value to encourage that sort of engagement. So you might need some CTA work, you might need some network growth work, and you might need to be doing the giving before you'll be getting the gotten, right? So you got to go out and give. So start doing what you want people to do for you, like comment, reshare other posts. Those are kind of my key takeaways from that question. So Jennifer, what's been your experience around that one?
Yeah, so I'll add one thing to what you just said. I love what you said about the network. I love what you said about tagging people. One thing that we are doing inside of our own database is making a list of, like, who would I tag in my community if I was talking about cyber liability insurance. Like, you should have 2 or 3 people that you can tag. Who would I tag in my community if I'm posting something about ransomware? Tag your chamber of commerce, or you should have that network. So I love that. Beyond that, I would also make sure you've added to your strategy having that content on your website somewhere. So having almost a content library on your website, because the goal is that when you have people that need your services, wherever they go, whether they pop to your website, they find you on YouTube, they see you on LinkedIn, they see you on Facebook, that you're there. And so see if there's a way to spread your reach a little bit, which is relatively easy when you already have your strategy in place. You're just saying, I've perfected Facebook, now let me add LinkedIn, or vice versa. Now let me add YouTube. Now let me point that content to a content library on my site. And then definitely check out what Ian just said, the training that they have, because I guarantee you will walk away with anywhere from 3 to 10 easy to execute tactics just to make it that much better. But remember that you're getting out there, and that everybody doesn't engage on content. It does not mean that it's not being seen. So, I mean, how many times do you see a piece of content you just scroll past? Because I guess I was, if I do it, I just didn't think about clicking that like button. I didn't comment. And so just be cautious of underestimating the effect just because of the metrics that you're seeing.
100%. There was another question around content marketing around the new WISP requirement. I would broaden this out. Whenever you get a new requirement, regulation, anything new that's happening in an industry or in an economic sector, that's always an invitation for content marketing. So if you think about that, when there's a new something or other, that's now blue ocean opportunity. So you're primarily in an education space, so that's the perfect time to be doing some of that content and be building a campaign. As with anything, it's useful to start with the end in mind. So what's the goal? What are the actions you want to have prescribed by spending the time to develop 1, 5, 10, 20 pieces of content over whatever time period around that topic? Make sure you got the end in mind. And then Jennifer, what I'll do is I'll let you kind of close us out. Last 35 seconds or so. What do you think about that question or about any other items?
So I want to go a completely different direction. I want to remind everyone that this process that hopefully you've downloaded by now, that process is about a 2-year process. Like it is not something that, instantly happened. I woke up and, it just had created itself. And so, my first process was really ugly. Like step 1, record video. Step 2, get it edited. Step 3, put it out on social media. Well, it had to become a little more complex than that. So don't be afraid to start where you are and just understand, like my process looks a little different today than it even did 3-4 weeks ago when we were prepping for this. So start where you are and just continue to improve.
Awesome. And with that, we're going to be right at the end. Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us today and coming on and being willing to share your process, share your knowledge, and share the learnings as to what's happened on here. Anyone, if you're interested in connecting with Jennifer, super active on LinkedIn, Facebook, you can find her there. You can go to mspsalesrevolution.com. Don't forget to click on that link at that website about the book and grab that book and start on your journey today.
Thanks, Ian. I appreciate it.
All right. Until next time, everyone, take it easy.